Hello and welcome to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. This week our guest is journalist, author, and somebody who knows something about almost everything, Sidney Blumenthal. Remember, we love taking your questions, so write to politicswarroom@gmail.com for next week's show. Now, we're going to get to as many as we can, but please don't forget to tell us where you're from. You also can get text updates about what's next for Politicon and Politics War Room by signing up at Politicon.com. Tell your friends about us. Remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And please check out the link to our sponsor, Quince, in our episode show notes. We thank you for supporting these sponsors because it really helps make this podcast happen. Hey, James, our guest is author, journalist, activist, and someone who is exceptionally well informed about almost everything, Sidney Blumenthal. Sidney, let's start with the Jeffrey Epstein files. Trump was rolled. Basically, you got to give great credit to those victims and to Ro Khanna and to Tom Massey and a few Republican women. They resisted it. Trump did every step of the way. And so now the House passed it, the Senate passed it, Trump's going to sign it. I am deeply suspicious of the Justice Department. Two things bother me. Number one, he launched a phony investigation of Democrats only by the Justice Department. And I can see them saying, wait a minute, we can't release files while we have ongoing investigations. And secondly, I don't trust Pam Bondi anyway. I think if there's bad stuff in there, am I being too conspiratorial?
I don't think you're conspiratorial. I think you're a pragmatic realist, Al. I think this is exactly the problem that we face right now, because somebody has figured out for Trump that the way to try and shut this down is to refer this to the Justice Department. And Pam Bondi put it in the Southern District of New York. She didn't give it to Lindsay Halligan. Who is screwing up the Comey cases. And they have a guy who is quite competent, Jay Clayton, who is the U.S. attorney there. And this is the way to bottle it up, because all they have to do is say, we can't comment on anything because it's under investigation. And in the meantime, they continue to smear and keep open the smears against targeted Democrats. But that doesn't end the Epstein files, because there are a lot of other avenues where it's open. And that's the problem that he faces. He can't shut it down.
Well, the one thing that's abundantly clear, there's stuff in there that Trump desperately does not want out. I don't believe it's just embarrassment, because nothing seems to embarrass him. There's not much evidence so far that he may have actually sexually assaulted one of those women. I don't know that, but the indications are maybe not. Do you have any guesses, any suspicions, any hunches of what he so desperately does not want out?
We don't know. We do know that there are credible reports from Bloomberg News and elsewhere that there are more than 1,000 FBI agents who've been working at their documents complex in Virginia, going through all of the Epstein files and the digital files, which include photographs and other materials, to redact Trump's name. And we also don't know what other names are being redacted at Kash Patel's instructions. And of course, he's acting on Bondi's instructions and of course on Trump's. So the cover-up is proceeding right now, even as we're talking.
Well, I don't, like you, I don't know what's in there, but Epstein's brother said he heard they are in the process of deleting stuff that's embarrassing. I don't know what he knows, but there's grounds for suspicion, because we have never seen a Justice Department, and I include the Nixon Justice Department, we have never seen a Justice Department so compromised. Whatever Trump dictates, they do. The minute he said, let's investigate Clinton and Larry Summers and other people, Pam Bondi said, yes, sir. She couldn't say it quick enough. There's nothing about this Justice Department that gives you any confidence, Sid, in their integrity.
No, about half of the professional staff of the Justice Department is now gone in less than a year. They've reduced whole sections of the Justice Department to nothing. The Public Integrity section, which investigates political corruption and other corruption, is down to 2 lawyers. The whole Civil Rights Division has been eviscerated. This is just a personal instrument for Trump at this point.
Final question before I turn it on this issue, before I turn it over to James. I have to say, I earlier praised Ro Khanna, Tom Massey, Marjorie Greene, and some others, and they deserve praise. A discharge petition is really hard. It's done very rarely, and they did it, and they stuck with it, and they deserve credit. Conversely, Mike Johnson was just outrightly dishonest. He said when the die was cast after fighting this thing for 7 weeks, he kept the House out. He wouldn't swear in the woman from Arizona, newly elected, because she would have been the last person that would have forced a discharge petition. And he said he's really upset because there should have been a full investigation. Why the hell did he stonewall this then for 7 weeks? Mike Johnson is as culpable in the cover up as the White House.
Yeah, political circumstances really, really were transformed in this period from which Adelita Grijalva in Arizona was elected in September. And now, when she was sworn in and was the key vote on the discharge petition, which triggered all the events that led the entire Congress basically to vote for the release of the Epstein files, we've seen almost a political revolution. Johnson was counting on this is my chief of staff back here.
I thought it was Pam Bondi, so I'm glad to know it's chief of staff.
Bondi was just stonewalling the whole thing. And what's interesting in what happened in the last 24 hours with the consent of the Senate is that what happened was that Johnson objected, and he was very upset. And he proposed amendments that were not taken up by the Republican Senate Majority Leader, John Thune. And what were those amendments? That other names of, quote, private citizens be redacted. This is at the same time that Trump has said that certain designated named individuals are now under investigation by the Justice Department. But who are the other names that Trump wanted to be protected that he certainly got Mike Johnson to propose? And now Thune wanted nothing to do with it. It's a pretty interesting subplot here.
Yeah, it sure is. Turning over to James with the thought, it just underscores again the need for the Democrats to take back Congress next year, because that's the only way these things are going to be investigated. I don't think James Carville disagrees with that, but take over, James, with your Georgia sweatshirt.
Thank you. And I got my Georgia sweatshirt, and I have my Ohio University Bobcat notepad here. So, Sidney, let's turn to politics, a topic that you and I share some passion for. Before the show, I was listening to my satellite radio. I was listening to Michael McConish and Mark Halpern. And their overwhelming consensus was this would have no effect on the MAGA base or Trump's polling. Do you see any weakening on the part of Republicans towards Trump, or do you agree with the Halpern-McConish thing that this will matter not to the Republican base?
Well, the Republican base is already flaking off from Trump, and his favorability number among Republicans is down not quite 10 points, but any amount down for Trump is potentially devastating for 2 reasons. One, he has overwhelmingly disapproval among Democrats and independents now. And 2, that adds to it. And it drives his numbers below 40, which is where he's at in the latest polls. The other thing is his entire control over the Republican Party is dependent upon his absolute dominance of Republicans and his ability to wield that against all other Republicans. And as it weakens, his control weakens, and then you get something like the Epstein files. And in terms of elections, we've seen in the November 4th election that Republican turnout is way down. And that's because of Trump's great unpopularity, and Democratic turnout is way up.
So this morning we were sharing the results of a Marist NPR poll, which is a highly regarded poll. And tell our listeners, tell our viewers, what did that poll show, and why does it kind of disprove this Merconish helping theory?
Well, the key finding of the Marist poll for National Public Radio is that there's a 14-point generic advantage for the Democrats in the congressional midterm election that's coming next year. That is an extraordinary number. The number for the Democrats in 2018, when they regained control of the House and won about 40 seats, was a little more than 8. This isn't just an untold number. My feeling was not surprised, although it's going to shock a lot of people. And people are going to say it's too unreal to be true, because what this will translate to is an enormous Republican defeat and Democratic wave in a year from now as circumstances increase. But my thought was, from the November 4th election, which was the equivalent of a midterm rejection of Trump, and it included gubernatorial races in New Jersey and Virginia, a referendum in California, and elections in Pennsylvania to Georgia, and so on. And what they all showed was that the polls were off to begin with. They showed them much closer, and the Democrats won by much greater margins. And the turnout was very different from what was predicted. The Republican turnout fell enormously, and the Democratic intensity was often equivalent to that of a presidential election. If you took those numbers and you created formulas, you would get even more than the generic number in the Marist poll. So there's no telling what will happen in the midterm elections, but the idea that all this is somehow meaningless is more than wishful thinking. It's sheer nonsense.
So one of the things that you believe, tell us why you think there may be photographs the FBI may be in possession of certain photographs, and what evidence is there that these photographs exist? Just tell you. I think you know something about this potential.
So I conduct a podcast myself with my colleague, Sean Wilentz of Princeton University. We call it the Court of History. It's found on the Legal AF channel of Midas. And that, on our podcast, we had Michael Wolff early on. And Michael was the one who discussed what he had been shown himself by Jeffrey Epstein. And let me tell you the story of what happened as a result of that. First of all, Michael Wolff, a journalist and author, had a long personal relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And he says he has also recorded more than 100 hours of tapes that he has in his possession that have not been made public. He hasn't made them public. Some of the emails, just 2 of them, came out last week, and they were very damaging to Trump, in which Epstein talks about how Trump knew about what was going on, and that he's the dog that doesn't bark in the night about Trump, what he knows and what he did. And that's in the Epstein-Wolff emails. But Michael told me something else. He told me that Epstein took him upstairs in his vast townhouse off Fifth Avenue and went into a room and opened his safe. and took out a dozen Polaroid pictures showing him, Donald Trump, with a group of scantily clad underage girls. And what Michael said was they were pointing and laughing at a stain on the crotch of his pants. So Michael says that Epstein showed him these photographs more than once, and then he put them back in his safe. Then, in July of 2019, Epstein was arrested again, and the FBI raided his townhouse and took the contents of his safe. We may presume that those photographs were in the safe or not. So as a result of our podcast, both Kash Patel and Pam Bondi were asked about these photographs in congressional hearings. Ted Lieu asked Kash Patel and actually showed a clip from our podcast where Michael Wolff explains what he saw. And Kash Patel stammered and didn't have an answer. Then Senator Sheldon Whitehouse in the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing of Pam Bondi also asked her, and she had no response and said she didn't know about it. Well, do these photos exist? Where are they? Are they in the possession of the FBI? And are they being redacted? And if you want to get conspiratorial, are they being destroyed? Is the evidence being suppressed in one way or another?
Haven't these photos been mentioned somewhere else besides about your and Sean's interview with Mike Wolff did more to kick this story to the point where it is than any single thing that I've seen in print or anywhere else. It just was started to frame it. But isn't there some further evidence that someone else mentioned the possibility of photos?
Well, in the emails that have been released just in the last week from the Epstein estate, there's an exchange between Jeffrey Epstein and a New York Times reporter named Landon Thomas Jr. And Epstein says to him, "Do you want to see the photos of Trump with girls in bikinis?" Now, I don't know if Epstein showed them to that then New York Times reporter and whether he can account for them. But Epstein certainly was offering them around. And that seems to be some sort of confirmation about what Michael Wolff was saying.
It certainly does. Albert?
Well, I would just going back to where you began, when it comes to Mark Halpern and Sidney Blumenthal, that is a no contest. Halpern's become a Trump sycophant, and I think Sidney will forget more about this story than Mark Halpern knows.
Style the holiday season with Quince. It wears well, it looks good, and like anything else, these people cut out a lot of middle people, and the prices are really good.
When we're faced with cold mornings and the craziness of holiday plans, you want wardrobes to be simple. You want to be able to suit up with stuff that looks sharp, feels good, and are things we actually want to wear. For us, that's Quince. But another great thing about Quince is that they deliver pieces that make great gifts, too. Quince's seasonal lineup is simple, but it's smart and it's easy. In the cold, there's nothing better than their $50 Mongolian cashmere sweaters. They feel like an everyday luxury, and their wool coats are equal parts stylish and durable. Now, if you're more into denim, as some of you are, their fits provide everyday comfort, all at a fraction of what you'd expect to pay. So how do they do it? Quince partners directly with ethical factories and top artisans, allowing them to cut the middleman and deliver premium quality at half the cost of other high-end brands. Because of that, you can give and receive luxury quality pieces without the luxury price tag. Now, the fits are perfect, the fabrics are incredible, and the style is unmatched. James can't wait to get some new activewear for the winter weather. It's been cold down there. But as good as James will look in his new gear, my Quince favorite is their luxurious stretch wool dress band. They feel amazing, and they're perfect for getting things done on the hill, attending a holiday party, or just reading by the fire in a recliner with style. The time is now. Give and get timeless holiday staples that last this season with Quince. Go to quince.com/warroom for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. We also have some good news. Quince is now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/warroom. Again, free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/warroom. The link is in our show notes. Sidney, let me switch to a subject that really, really bothers me, and that was the slobbering greeting that Donald Trump gave the Saudi dictator and murderer, according to the intelligence files of Americans, Mohammed bin Sultan, who commissioned the murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi 7 years ago. They used a bone saw to chop up his body. American intelligence said he was behind it. It's bad enough. I know you have to talk to Saudi Arabia. They're an important player in the regions. Bad enough that we're giving them F-35s, and that Trump had this lavish dinner for him and something at the Kennedy Center. But he went on to say that Khashoggi really had a lot of people had problems with Khashoggi, and this guy knew nothing about it because this guy is such a good guy. I thought that was as despicable a White House meeting as I can remember.
Well, Trump has completely abandoned the part of U.S. foreign policy going back to the very beginning, in which we stand up for our ideals and represent democracy and human rights. And this was a demonstration of it. And he said about the murder of the Washington Post columnist Adnan Khashoggi, who went into a Turkish visa office and was murdered and cut up at the orders of the Saudi leader for being critical in the Washington Post. And Trump said, well, things happen. He offered himself up as the chief defender and apologist, the president of the United States, of the murder of a Washington Post journalist to a Saudi dictator. And what does he get in exchange? Well, there are all sorts of interests, and some of them quite personal. The Saudis have given $2 billion to his son-in-law, Jared Kushner.
At the order of MBS.
At the specific order of MBS to enrich the Kushner-Trump family. And there are questions about internally in our own U.S. military about giving the Saudis the jet fighters and the technology for that. There's a subtext to this too that relates to strangely enough, to the Epstein files. And it involves the Khashoggi family that no one has mentioned before. And it's this. Jeffrey Epstein was the financial advisor to Adnan Khashoggi, the uncle of the journalist who was murdered. Now, Adnan Khashoggi was an arms dealer and centrally involved in the creation of the Iran-Contra scandal.
I remember.
And at some point, when Trump went bankrupt in his first bankruptcy, he had to sell his yacht. His yacht was called the Princess, named after his daughter, Ivanka. But he had bought that yacht from Khashoggi. It was originally Khashoggi's yacht. The man who, Jeffrey Epstein, was a financial advisor for, at the same time that Trump and Epstein were, as many people have testified from his brother to Michael Wolff, the closest friends. So clearly Trump knew the Khashoggi family, and now he's back talking about it in a very different way.
Boy, he sure is.
Talk about dogs that don't bark in the night.
Well, and on I think it's a lot of this is about high level grifting, as everything is about Trump. Money deals, he's going to get over there, golf courses, hotels in Jeddah, and everything else. But on the national security front, you raised the question of, did we really want to give F-35s to the Saudis? That's an incredibly complicated and sophisticated plane. And a security guarantee. I mean, I'm perfectly willing to say that my grandson someday might have to fight for the security of Europe if they're invaded, or Japan, not Saudi Arabia. I mean, it really is. I don't know. Tell me if you think I'm overreacting, Sidney, because I think this whole thing was just, as I say, an absolute outrage.
He gave MBS everything that he wanted, and the kitchen sink, and the jet fighters. And Trump, in exchange, is getting, we don't exactly know what. We know that his sons are in partnership with the son of Steve Witkoff in a crypto firm, World Liberty, and that they are receiving all sorts of private investments, which is a very interesting way to pay the Trump family. We just have no idea what's going on in the background. The New Yorker ran an investigation and estimates that Trump personally has made $3.4 billion in less than a year as president, in violation of the Constitution's Emoluments Clause. And certainly Saudi Arabia and its allies, the Emirates and Qatar and so on, are central to all of that. And let's not forget the $400 million airplane that's being refurbished into some sort of Air Force One by Trump, which he took as a gift. And Trump feels indebted. And what do these debts mean in the short run, the medium run, and the long run for the United States and our interests, not to mention what it does to tarnish our ideals?
Boy, James.
So let me get this straight and tell me if I'm missing any part of this. During the administration of Donald Trump, an American journalist was murdered with a chainsaw whose bones were divvied up. And Trump's own intelligence agency, during his administration, said it was the leader of the Saudi government that ordered this. And after that, the leader of the Saudi government ordered the Saudi wealth fund, to give Trump's son-in-law $2 billion. And Trump said he didn't think that a Saudi leader did it. Is that what really happened? Is any part of that I got that is not correct?
So far, you're, if I can fact check you,
yes,
you're accurate.
I'm accurate.
Yeah.
And his own
Georgia sweatshirt that did it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to be sure that people just understood the level that we're dealing with here.
Yeah. That's, things happen, says Trump. He waved it away. He dismissed it. There was another interesting part of that event in the Oval Office as well. So a reporter from ABC News, a woman,
right,
asks Trump about the Epstein files and asks him a very reasonable question, which is, why are we going through all this in the Congress when you can just release them yourself by your own order, which is true. So Trump attacks her, tells her she's awful, says that ABC shouldn't lose its license. It should be investigated by his FCC commissioner, Brendan Carr, and that she is insubordinate. Sitting next to him is a man who has ordered the murder of a journalist, and Trump himself has just justified it. Things happen, and he's telling a journalist, you're insubordinate. Well, MBS regarded Jamal Khashoggi as insubordinate, and he was murdered and cut into pieces. And that was the scene in the White House, the Oval Office.
But it's really stunning when you think about it.
James, let me add one thing and then turn it back to you. He also said, Sidney, how dare you embarrass a guest at the White House? He said to this journalist. This is the same man who, when Zelensky was sitting next to him at the White House, insulted him in a way I have never seen a president do to a visiting politician. So his regard for not embarrassing someone in the White House is, to put it mildly, quite selective. It's okay if you're a murderer, but not if you're a supposed ally.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
sorry,
really
James.
interesting, Al, because you raise an incident where Trump says to Zelensky, you don't have the cards. And he dismisses him. And it raises the question of what cards MBS has in regards to Trump, because he clearly has the cards, because Trump is the one who is deferential to him, and even does a little performance of calling a journalist insubordinate before MBS, while he also justifies MBS's murder of a journalist.
James, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Sidney, on your show, The Court of History, you had a journalist, Carol Ling.
Carol Leonnig, who is a former investigative reporter, won many Pulitzers for the Washington Post. She's now the chief investigative reporter for MS Now.
So she has a book out on the Justice Department. Can you succinctly say what she found out in the book and what was reported about the current Department of Justice in the United States government?
Well, we did a two-parter with her and her co-author, who is a reporter at the Washington Post, Aaron Blake. The book is called Injustice. It's a new book. It's a very important book in which they report the history of how the Justice Department has been destroyed through the entire Trump era. They begin with what Trump has done, more or less. They begin with January 6th. They talk about Merrick Garland's slow reaction in prosecuting Donald Trump. And then they come to how Trump has purged the Justice Department and the FBI, including all the prosecutors and FBI agents who were involved in the investigations of January 6th, and how Trump has turned the Justice Department into a personal instrument of his retribution, which we are seeing played out today in these cases, one after another, that are meeting the disapproval of various judges as shabby and very likely to be thrown out. And so the whole, it is an epic story of an attack on the American system of justice, and particularly the Department of Justice, which is being hollowed out even now.
Well, Sidney, I can't thank you enough. As a dear friend, you've been, I think, the most influential person in seeing this story is starting to get the attention that it deserves. And I just appreciate you taking time to come on out, but I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, James, let's close on one politics question, because Sidney is so versed in that. There's an internal argument going on. Actually, it's external too now, on the meaning of the November election. Was it Mondami and did the left really have a resurgence, or was it Spanberger and Sherrill and Pennsylvania and a number of other places? What do you make of this dispute, and is it overblown?
I think that it's overblown for several reasons. One, let's just deal with the New York part first, because that's the most controversial part, involving the election of Mondani as mayor. I think in great part, that is the result of, one, his seizing on the affordability issue and never letting go of it, and two, the strangeness and weirdness of New York politics and what happened there. which are unlike anything else. And this is a local election. You had Eric Adams as mayor, who you had corruption charges. You had the administration coming in and pardoning him. You had a whole scandal involving that. Andrew Cuomo is a person who carries a wagon train of baggage, so lots of particularities to the New York situation. But what's consistent is the affordability issue between him, what happens in New Jersey, what happens in Virginia. And that goes to Trump's betrayal and of his number one election promise to reduce inflation and the cost of living on day one. That was one, if not the preeminent reason that he was elected in 2024. There were other factors as well, but that was a chief factor, and it was his betrayal, and that's the thread that runs through November 4th.
Yeah, and that's the thread that may continue in 2026.
Yeah, we note that there's a report, even as we are speaking, about trade, in which his tariffs have essentially destroyed our international trade. And our imports are way, way down. And that's going to weigh on our economy all through the year of coming year of 2026 going into the midterms. And as bad as the result was for the Republicans this year, 2025, Trump's economic policies will continue to be a burden on the Republicans all through the next year. And in a way, it's too late for him to change it. And if he did, he would have to admit that he's made a fundamental error and drag the country through this entire period of economic pessimism.
Sidney, there's one thing I can guarantee. Trump will not acknowledge he's made a fundamental error or an error of any sort. That is one thing we've learned about him.
Well, I know that James is a betting man, and I urge you to take anyone who would accept that bet.
I agree. I want to tell you something. What James and I aspire to being, we just aspire, is to be the poor woman's Sidney and Sean. If we could achieve that, I mean, I'll tell you something, Carville, we will arrive. You've been a fabulous guest. We can't thank you enough, Sidney.
Well, thank you, Al. And it's, we've known each other for decades, and I've always admired your work in journalism and reports. And James and I go back to near the beginning of time. There were no dinosaurs then, but it was shortly after then. So.
I just got a text, and it says, 2 new generic ballot polls, Maris D plus 14, and it said Marquette D plus 9. I don't know if that's a Wisconsin or national.
It's a national poll. I thought it was plus 5, but it's a national poll.
Okay,
yeah. Right. If it's plus 9, it's greater than the Democrats' generic final result in 2018, in which the Democrats won 40 seats. So that's the low end now.
Yes.
As of this date, and we're going forward.
Correct. But the Halpern's McConaughey is the wheel keeps rolling and nothing can stop Trump.
Well, I hope everyone I hope they're betting with you guys.
James stepped away for a minute to place a big wager on Blumenthal versus Halpern. Sidney, thank you. You were terrific.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, James, for the outrage of the week, boy, it's just hard now. I mean, there's so many possibilities. But if you want to doubt that not only is this the most corrupt, but also the most incompetent Justice Department, read Magistrate Judge William Fitzpatrick's opinion on how flawed the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey is. The U.S. attorney in Virginia wouldn't bring a case, so they fired him and they brought in the White House insurance lawyer who knew from nothing, maybe an illegitimate appointment. The presentation of the case and the evidence were flimsy as to exaggerate the import, and it reeks of retribution. Ty Cobb, who was Trump's lawyer once, says the case is dead, as it should be. But so, too, is the unconscionable case against Maureen Comey, a highly regarded career prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. She helped convict Epstein enabler Ghislaine Maxwell. She was fired because Trump hates her father, because of her last name. She also is entitled to civil service protection. But my outrage here is the head of that fabled Southern District is Jay Clayton. What did he do when one of his prize assistants was illegally fired? Nothing. He said, that was Washington. He is a real sit-down guy, which explains why Attorney General Pam Bondi has tapped Clayton to investigate Democrats' connections to Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, mine is, I don't want to call it an outrage because there's an insidious, dangerous disease, and it's called both-siderism. And it's very, very easy to practice. It's very easy to pull off. It's very easy for everybody to applaud you. And I'm going to give you an example. And it was today's column by Tom Friedman. Okay. I, like most people, have dealt with him and know him and had a number of social exchanges with him. I find him to be an utterly pleasant man. I think he's well-traveled. I think he has a lot of sources. I think he's a man with a good heart. And all of this is what makes this so tragic in my mind. So he writes a column saying there's a cowardness throughout the world right now, and that he's very worried. And he gives the example that on the right, there's Nazi sympathizers, the Israeli settlements, which he is correctly and been very passionately opposed to. I think the whole time. I would give Tom a lot of credit for that. And then the left who is pro-Hamas. Well, that sounds... Well, okay, they got the Nazis, and the right. There's a difference, and understand this. The Nazis are Republicans. Those New York Republicans on that fall, Paul Ingresa, Nick Fuentes, who had dinner at Mar-a-Lago. The people that were protesting at Columbia or Harvard were protesting Joe Biden. They're not Democrats. You've got to understand there's a difference. They're not really much. You have some, understandably, in outside of Detroit and Dearborn that are probably could be characterized as Democrats and characterized as pro-Hamas, but it's a very, very small part. The Nazi wing, remember Lindsey Graham said he thinks that the Nazi wing of the Republican Party sucks. They're all Republicans. And so for a guy like Tom, and is innocent as the day is long, with no malice, just lapsing in to the pox on both of their houses bullshit that I would hear all the time in Washington. And you could say, but on the other hand, or James, you got to admit, the Democrats do the same thing. And it's not the same thing. It's not at all the same thing. It's not the same thing to have a pack of Nazis or Nazi sympathizers, whatever the fuck they are, and they're pretty out and out about it, down to the Heritage Foundation, which is, most central, probably intellectual institution on the right. The people that were saying River to the Sea were saying, hey, Joe, ho, genocide Joe must go. They're not Democrats. And there's a difference, and it's a difference with a distinction. And I'm going to keep making it every time. I just think this kind of stuff is played a large part into how we ended up where we are today. This inability to make a value judgment, a clear value judgment that one party is doing something and the other party is really not to any significant level participating in the same kind of extremist politics.
Yeah. No, I agree. Tom's a good guy, but I agree with you. I agree with you.
It happens to the best of us. And the problem is everybody's going to agree with him. It's just not true. And it is true that Paul Ingratius got a big job with the GAO now.
Well, they gave him a big job, and when he was even for this Republican Senate, they said, "Oh no, this is too much." And so what they did is he couldn't be confirmed, so they gave him a job that didn't require confirmation. I mean, it's just
but he is in the people on that chain, the New York young Republicans, some of them in their 40s. They are Republicans. Okay, get that through your head. In everything in these people's mind, it all comes down to Harvard. Somehow or another, Harvard defines the entire goddamn Democratic Party. I don't know why, but it's just become, well, the groups at Harvard. Again, I'll go back and say what our friend Jill Abrams said. She can correct me that she was on the faculty and she was in touch with a lot of the Jewish students doing this. And to a student, they said they were not fearful. But you got to throw in, there's some key words you always got to throw in so everybody can understand what a fair person you are.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. Okay, now for a section we love. We love every segment, actually, but listener questions because you guys out there are so good. We're going to start off with one of my favorite towns, Raleigh, North Carolina, and Laura. Laura asked you, James, the Democrats, she thinks, have shown great determination in recent events, release of the Epstein files for most of the shutdown fight. She's wants you to tell her, how do we turn that into a strategy and a message moving into the election year?
Oh, well, first of all, Laura, your question has so many things that I want to talk about, and I thank you for it. The first thing is that you had all of the hand-wringing. The Democrats don't have a plan. The Democrats don't have a leader. The Democrats don't have a message. The Democrats caved on the budget bill. The Democrats are in total disarray. That Trump is a juggernaut. He's dominating the news cycle. Oh, shit. I'm not spinning you out, Laura. Of course, you saw the election returns. You saw what's happened. You saw in the Marist poll about who they blamed for the shutdown. 2-1, they blame the Republicans in Congress and Trump more than they blame the Democrats because people are not stupid. All right. In a party without a candidate, a designated presidential candidate, is very difficult to have a message. However, what we can have, and what we did very successfully in this November, and I think we can do it very successfully next November, is we can have an argument. And the argument is that we need to put brakes on this. We need to stop this. This is not who we are. They're not doing anything about the matters that affect you and your life. And there's corruption and everything else. That's an argument. Then we have a candidate, we have a message. But I will say this. For all of the carping and the second guessing and, oh, how could you say that? We need to fight every day, fight them here, fight them there. Just let them through. They've destroyed themselves. Trump has done more, 50 times more to destroy himself than the Democrats have done to destroy him. And he's going to keep destroying himself. And I hate to say this, we're not going to be able to have a message, but we can have an argument, and we have to have the argument with the Republicans, not among ourselves. The time for that is in the primaries for president in 2028. That's why I was particularly distressed to see a story. I don't know if it was Mandami, but people around Mandami are talking about primarying Dan Goldman. Of all the people in the world we don't need to be fighting with, Dan Goldman would be in the top tier of people we don't need to be fighting with. Okay.
Or are you right? Because if the Democrats take back the House and they have the kind of investigations they ought to have, he's one of a handful of people who know how to do that as a former prosecutor in the Southern District. Primarying him would be insane.
Stupid. Just stupid. Don't. Right. And by the way, If you want to be in the progressive wing, or you want to be the urban, young, cool, future forward-looking person that wants to all the fossil, get a presidential candidate and get behind that candidate and let other Democrats decide.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. You're not going to win.
Right. That's absolutely true.
You're not going to win.
James Gordon in Norwood, Michigan said there seems to be a consensus building on the left that the country is not ready for a woman president. Michelle Obama recently said this. Your thoughts on that and Michelle as a candidate? I disagree. I just simply disagree. Michelle Obama is not going to be a candidate, so you can get rid of that thought. But the fact is that Hillary Clinton, who won the popular vote in 2016, it was a flawed campaign. It really, really was. And I think with a good campaign, she would have won the Electoral College too. And in 2024, the circumstances were different. Joe Biden is the prime culprit of what happened. But Kamala Harris was not a good candidate. I don't know who, but I think if a strong woman candidate came, I don't know whether it's a Gretchen Whitmer or I'm gonna just stay on Michigan or Alyssa Slotkin. I don't think the country would automatically reject a woman candidate.
So I got a call, reporter doing a profile on Gretchen Whitman, and she was the author of my favorite political observation of this century, just fix the damn roads. All right.
Right.
She, so many women and Democratic women in Michigan government, and it's amazing. I mean, who they have elected, what they've done. You're right. Point out that Ms. Clinton lost because of somewhat of a flawed campaign strategy, but also it was a distributional fluke. All right. So let's understand it. The next thing is we're not going to stop nominating women, nor should we. So the question now, what has changed, and we all know this, that we all had to be part of the identity politics. Biden had to promise that he'd have a black woman, a woman of color. Well, I hate that slogan. I hate to say it, but okay. That became that doesn't matter this time. No one is, if in fact we nominate a woman or we nominate a white male, no one's going to make that an issue. That's what's changed about American politics. You can still elect women. You can certainly still elect non-white people to office, and we do it all the time, and we should do that. But being a white male this time was more or less a barrier in the earlier part of this decade. That is not going to be the case in 2028.
James, I totally agree. And I would say, for instance, to be completely hypothetical, if the Democrats were to nominate a ticket of Andy Beshear and Gavin Newsom, and anyone complained about its lack of diversity, they're just crazy. I mean,
and it's not even, understand, it's not even going to, if someone says it, they're going to get slapped down immediately. Right. But it was part of the argument during that time
it was
Democratic politics.
That's why Joe Biden chose Kamala Harris. It was quite clear. He made that.
And that became.
And then, James, just me add to that, because he went on, and when you read all these inside accounts down, you talk to people in there, Joe Biden picked her as his vice president, and then went on and said in 23 and 24, I've got to run because she's not capable of winning or governing. That's a terrible indictment of Joe Biden.
I guess, I tend to say, look, the guy, he just wanted to do it, and he was looking for every excuse to tell himself it was okay to do it. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm saying when you arrive at a fundamentally catastrophic decision, that is that I am going to run for re-election. And by the way, he kept at that decision from the night of June the 27th until July the 21st.
Yeah.
It was over 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you say you're going to do something, you're always looking for the justification. Well, the justification was she couldn't win. I was the only Democrat that could win. And it was all bullshit. And you hate to do it because you like Biden. You think he's not gotten near the credit that he deserves. But man, he just made one awful mistake.
Well, let's pick up on that from our next question, which is to you, and it's from Nicholas in Bakersfield, California, who asked if the recent Democratic victories were less about a shift in the electorate and more about the fact that earlier the Democrats were weighted down, he says, by having Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket.
Okay. First of all, I'm a big believer that economics plays a huge role in every election. I think the cruelty mattered. I mean, if you look at California, which had nothing to do with economics, it was overwhelming. People were just, and certainly affordability costs were a factor in this. You didn't see that happening with Trump. But this was, the thing about this last election, it was everywhere. It was overwhelming. There wasn't one place that you could pick out. Maybe if you picked out Erie County, it was way out of the norm, but it could be other reasons for that.
Oh, but those retention judges got over 60%. So you're right, James.
It was California, it was Pennsylvania, it was Georgia, it was Mississippi. It was wherever you looked. It was there. And I think all the evidence is this is going to do nothing but continue. And I think people are starting to figure that out. And now you're starting to see these polls. I think it was Peter Hannity. And Peter, if I'm giving you credit for something you don't deserve, well, fuck it, I think. But as I recall, I read this morning, I think it was somebody went back and looked at the turnout in college towns in Virginia, at Harrisonburg, where JMU is, Charlottesville, Blacksburg, William and Mary, even at the historically black colleges, it was higher than it was in 2024. I mean, a lot of this, part of the Democratic base, we lost a little bit with these college towns. Man, did they come roaring back. And they went through every one, most of those places I've been to these college towns in Virginia. And like I say, in Albemarle County, the turnout in 2025 was higher than the presidential year. And I think it was true in Blacksburg too. I mean, it's hard to imagine that kind of turnout distortion that you have. And we were told, the young people had all turned on the Democrats. That was it. It all turned away, and Okay.
That reminds me, James, one of my more embarrassing moments. I traveled with Obama in October in 2008, and we stopped in Harrisonburg, Virginia, home of James Madison, and they said the last presidential candidate to be here was Stephen Douglas. And I said to the local guy, I said, well, how did Lincoln do in Harrisonburg? He said, sir, Lincoln wasn't on the ballot.
That's right. He was.
So in any event, John in Chicago asked, should Democrats in the next election cycle fix the Affordable Care Act, which basically puts Band-Aids on a broken system, or should they push for universal health care? John, pushing for universal health care, pushing for Medicare for all would be insane. I'm sorry, people will not accept it. We've seen that in elections. We see it everywhere. What you should do, and I disagree with that the ACA is only putting Band-Aids on a broken system. There's some 20 million people who are now insured, and Zeke Emanuel can tell you how many deaths that has avoided. You build on it. You haven't had as much of a chance as you should have had to build on it, but those healthcare tax subsidies help build on it. And there may be some things you do about cost, but you don't try to turn to a Medicare for all. The Affordable Health Care Act is a good foundation.
I agree. And always the problem with that argument is that you're telling people, and, let's just take one class of people that are important and they do great work and out of public place. And so much of what their compensation is in benefits. So you take a fireman in Charlottesville, Virginia, and you tell that fireman whose union has negotiated her or him or whatever a pretty generous health care, and you're going to say, we're going to take you out of that. You can't have that. We're just going to put you in the whole Medicare system and all that has. That is not going to go over well. If many people have said, well, if you were going to start from scratch, you would have a system of Medicare for all. That may very well be, but we're not starting from scratch. Okay.
Yes. If it was 1947, yes.
Yeah. Great.
But
understand, and it sounds good. It sounds reasonable. It sounds simple. And remember, it killed Elizabeth Warren when she came out with it in Iowa. And the reason it killed her was interesting. It wasn't that these people, these Democrats in Iowa were against it. They thought it was electoral poison. Democrats don't want to nominate someone who's for Medicare for all. Not so that Democrats have a huge problem with it, but they think it very correctly, it's an electoral downer.
Yeah, and it also played a role in Kamala Harris's disastrous 2019 campaign as she went back and forth on it. So it's just build on the ACA. First of all, James, remember how unpopular it was 10, 12 years ago? It's now popular. 60% of the people support it. 70% of the people want to have those healthcare tax subsidies extended. So the Republicans are going to put out some kind of phony healthcare plan pretty soon, and it's something that'll be a gift to Democrats.
So understand it, that anything that the Democrats do, the Republicans are going to say it's socialist, or they'll say it's communist. So it doesn't matter. The healthcare is one giant part of this. The thing that's coming in this country, and we're not ready for it, and that is the accumulation of generational wealth by our generation, actually a little bit older than the baby boomers. It's just these stories that are coming out. And the young people have they're just having it terribly. They can't buy houses, they can't educate anybody. There was the CEO of Ford saying there's 5,000 auto mechanic jobs that they have that they can't fill. And I think that this country made two bad bets. And they both seem like good bets at the time. One is we decided we're going to be a nation of homeowners. And two, that we're going to be a nation of people that went to college. So the main thing that the government encouraged was owning your own home and people going to 4-year colleges. It's now pretty clear that both of those strategies are, in effect, blowing up in our faces. And I think they were done with the right intention, but young people are out of the housing market. They're basically out of the education market because the way that we've done this. And the next president is going to have to rethink this and is going to have to embrace some economic populism, because I'm going to tell you, this thing could break. And if somebody doesn't get ahead of it, it's going to get ahead of everybody else. And people are starting to get really pissed. They're starting to figure out what's happened to their lives. They're starting to figure out why they don't have a lot of hope to get a good job or to be able to buy a house, because people, once all of us bought houses, we put zoning restrictions and God knows what else just to drive the price of the asset up, which will, our price of our asset goes up. The price of what a young person has to pay goes up too. We got to really rethink this whole idea of 4-year college and home ownership.
James, my really esteemed colleague, a great reporter and writer, David Wessel, 16 or 17 years ago, wrote a book which said the pillar of our economic future and growth really is community colleges, junior colleges.
Oh, Trace.
And we foolishly cut back on some of those investments in critical states. And that is even more true today than it was when David wrote it. If we invest more in that, Ford will not be without machinists.
$120,000 a year. Jim Farley, it was in the Wall Street Journal today that he said, if you got a bay, we'll pay you $120,000 a year. I mean, that's a starting salary. Shit, so you get a master's in French literature. What's your starting salary?
The reason I'm laughing is that my daughter is now a clinical psychologist, and she was earlier a mechanic. Maybe she ought to go back to being a mechanic.
I was talking to Lauren without being preachy about it. Girl, grab that, turn that wrench, move it, man.
It's
everywhere. Yes, I was talking to Lauren. I didn't want you ought to bring a name up. That's fine.
Simon in Cincinnati. I like some of these last questions, James. Simon asks, should we create a January 6th museum so people can remember it?
Yes. It should not so much that they remember it, is that they never forget it.
Right.
And they never forget that their countrymen, by and large, 45% of their countrymen actually approved of this.
Right.
Okay, and which was a massive criminal act. So yes, we should, and that not so much that people remember it, but I guess that people never forget it because it can happen.
Yeah, and I want my grandchildren and their friends and their children to know that there was a time after the Civil War where there were people who tried to violently overthrow the United States government, and they were all pardoned and excused.
They would have hung Mike Pence.
Yeah.
I mean, I really believe that. Did it gotten hopeful?
Thank God Josh Hawley has a splinter speed, or Lord knows what would have happened to him.
Yeah.
But Alex in Morris, Illinois. James, you know where Morris is?
I do not.
I don't either. We'll check. He asked, why haven't the Democrats reintroduced the bipartisan immigration bill? It would demonstrate Democrats are open to real reform, proper funding, and humanitarian treatment. I don't think you want to introduce a bill now. I'm not even sure you want to introduce a bill if you take the majority in 2027. I think what you do want to do is say, here is the Democrats' position. We want a really tough border. We want a really, really tough border. We want to have a pathway to citizenship that's realistic and take some time. And we do want to have humanitarian treatment. What the Biden administration sadly did was they forgot about the first part. And so, therefore, the rest didn't make any difference. And people forget, in the 2012 presidential election, that was Barack Obama's position, and Mitt Romney back then was really much more closer to Trump's position now. And voters, when they voted on that issue, sided with Obama.
Yes, and in politics, one of the things it changes a lot, and Romney, justifiably credit in Massachusetts, had pretty aggressive health care.
He did
when he was,
and he was a good senator too.
But things like, I always point out to people that in 2008, both Hillary and Obama were against gay marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows you how fast that the ground shifts. And you just I don't know if I've seen ground shift as fast as is shifting here in the United States. I mean, we just can't appreciate how big some of these shifts were, this past election. And if it continues anything like in that direction, I saw that the appellate court knocked out the Texas redistricting plan. I am not totally positive that they didn't do the Republicans a favor.
Yeah.
I'm not totally positive of that.
And my fear is the Supreme Court will turn that down because they always side with Republicans. But it is one thing. You're absolutely right about redistricting is not going to be the big bonanza that Donald Trump thought.
If I were the lawyers wanting it to overturn it, I would subtly argue that if this went through, it would be bad for Republicans because that would affect the decision of this court more than anything else.
Yeah, sure would.
If they think there's a chance it could hurt the Republicans. Then
James, we keep coming back to John in Gurnee, Illinois. John writes every week.
Yeah.
But John, we like your questions. So James, he wants to know regarding the Supreme Court's decision on giving Trump broad immunity, one of the worst decisions in the last 20 years, wouldn't this immunity retroactively also cover Biden, Obama, and Clinton? And if so, why does Trump keep threatening to investigate him?
Well, I don't. First of all, I think so. It would have to be something they did as president.
That's true.
First of all, I think the statute of limitations are probably long gone on
Clinton and Obama for sure.
Yeah. So it's a now. What the Supreme Court said is contrary to everything that you learned as a kid, that we live in this country because everybody is subject to the law. We have no kings. And they said, actually, we do have a king. And now, of course, when Trump is not president, how are they going to live with that precedent? How are they going to deal with that? I don't think these guys think very much further than that. And I do think, and I continue to believe, that there is a crisis of confidence in this country in a branch of government. And I think that lack of confidence is well-deserved when it comes to the Supreme Court. And I think the country's got to think about what can we do, what kind of intervention can we undertake that can restore confidence in that third branch of government, particularly the Supreme Court.
James, a question: if in 2024, hypothetically, if the same exact case had come before this Supreme Court, involving presidential immunity, but it was Joe Biden and not Donald Trump, do you think the decision would have been the same?
Oh, of course not. The only problem they have, they're going to have to go through some intellectual gymnastics, which I might do. But they don't even tell you. They're shout a docket, and they just don't assign reasons. Just, fuck you, this is what we say is the law, and we don't even have to justify it. Which I guess you say they have the power to do, but why would you head a branch of government? You're John Roberts. Why wouldn't you want the institution that you had to have confidence and credibility with the public? It almost always has before. You have lost all of it, man. And we're all better off if we have a court that people don't always agree with, but respect and think that it struggles to find answers, and sometimes it comes up with answers we disagree with. We can live with that. This court does not do that.
Yeah.
It comes to a conclusion, and it just tells you what its conclusion is, and then I'm much fucking interested in telling you why. And it all started with Bush v. Gore, where they said, you can't use this conclusion for anything else other than this because, honestly, it makes no fucking sense when we're getting ready to rule. That's what they said. That's exactly what they said. And that told them that you can get away with it.
Yeah.
And they're getting away with it the whole time. Now, Trump ain't going to get away with it. They've caught over him.
Well,
they don't.
Keep those questions coming. We love them. And for all you out there, if you want to know how bad the governor of Louisiana is and how much he's trying to mess up a great state university, both academically and even his football team, just look at James Carville's jersey today, right now.
I got more. I got my UC Berkeley shirt. I'm gonna get my Ohio U Bobcats.
This is what you did, Governor Landry.
That's it.
Okay, keep those questions coming, and we'll be back next week.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. Now, as always, send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show at Politicon. Following this episode, we'd appreciate it if you check out the link to our sponsor, Quince, in our episode show notes. Now, we thank you for supporting them because when you do, it helps make this podcast happen. Now, to keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And check out our Substack at politicswarroom.com. James and I are constantly adding new content, so go take a look. You can also find other shows you might enjoy in the Politicon YouTube channel or when you search Politicon on your favorite podcast sites. Remember, please rate the show with a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with another show as we continue our War Room planning.